Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here. I look forward to hearing from you. As our founders recognized, the census is fundamental to our democracy, playing a critical role not just in governance, but in shaping decisions made by organizations and institutions across American life. An accurate census is essential for a fair distribution of political power here in Congress and for the equitable allocation of billions of dollars of federal funds to states and communities, including for programs like Medicaid, free and reduced school lunches, Head Start, SNAP. Its data is used by businesses and nonprofits to determine where and how to operate, and by state and local governments to decide where to invest in public infrastructure like roads and hospitals and schools. But the census is not just some mathematical equation to distribute congressional seats and taxpayer dollars. It's deeply rooted in our founders' vision of what a government by and for the people should be. Alexander Hamilton is on record saying during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, there can be no truer principle than this, that every individual of the community at large has an equal right to the protection of the government. Ultimately, the census is a national snapshot we take every 10 years that helps us understand and define who we are, how to govern, and undermining that process in ways that distort that picture will harm all of us. That's why Democratic and Republican administrations alike have historically tried to protect the census from political interference and partisan pressures. But this president and his MAGA allies are deviating from that precedent, once again trying to rig things in their favor. Now, these efforts aren't new. They began under the first administration when they tried to add an unprecedented citizenship question to the census. This was a blatant attempt by political appointees to exclude non-citizens from our count, which they expected to, quote, benefit Republicans and non-Hispanic whites, end quote, and which was ultimately rejected by the Supreme Court. And those efforts continued with the development of the right-wing Project 2025 manifesto, which, as predicted, has become a playbook for the Trump administration. It devotes a whole section to plans to appoint political appointees loyal to the White House to lead the census in order, quote, to execute a conservative agenda, end quote, which includes trying to add a citizenship question again, focusing census engagement on conservative groups, and limiting efforts to engage historically marginalized and undercounted groups. Then earlier this year, President Trump reinstated a memo to the Commerce Department ordering that the census not count undocumented immigrants when determining each state's share of congressional seats. And we've just heard a little bit of that rationale, which really conflates the idea of who is in this country legally, not legally. I mean, we constantly hear from our colleagues here about illegal aliens, not understanding that fully 44% of immigrants in our country are citizens, that another 26% are legal permanent residents, that another 5% are here on visas. So the vast majority of immigrants in our country are in fact here legally, as opposed to the constant refrain we hear from the other side of the aisle. So at any rate, the Constitution's command is that the, quote, whole number of persons be counted. The president has also posted on his social media that he wants his administration to start work on a new census. And in a common theme of this administration, it blatantly ignores the fact that the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the authority to conduct the census. Our Constitution's framers understood the importance of having an accurate and comprehensive population count. That's reflected in the fact that Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, the Enumeration Clause, mandates that representatives be apportioned among the states according to the whole number of persons in each state using an actual enumeration. Later on, the drafters of the 14th Amendment kept this phrasing while amending the clause to account for the end of slavery, reiterating that a state's representation in Congress must be determined by counting the whole number of persons in each state. So it really couldn't be clearer. The census must count the whole number of persons, not just a subset of persons living in the U.S. The Constitution's drafters could have used a narrower term like citizens or voters or something else, which they did, for example, in other parts of the 14th Amendment. But they purposely used the broader term persons in the apportionment provision, making it clear that all people count, including women who could not yet vote at the time of that drafting, children, indentured servants who were often immigrants, and former slaves. And they rejected proposals that would restrict the census to voters. Additionally, the requirement of an actual enumeration has never meant that census takers are only required to count only those who they can reach directly or in person. We know that the effort to count every person every decade has never been perfect, and that's why there have been continual improvements over time. And that's for a variety of reasons, chief among them being that certain populations are difficult for census takers to reach. Renters are harder to reach than homeowners. Children are particularly tough to reach, especially if they are not reading and writing yet. But the Constitution does account for this. The Supreme Court made clear in Utah versus Evans that the Constitution doesn't specify exactly how the census should be counted. As the court noted in that case, census takers implementing our very first count in the late 1700s were only required to report the names of household heads, which is very different from our system now. Our framers knew better than to try and anticipate the technology or methodology that America would need to conduct the count in the future, one that must capture the hundreds of millions of people living in the country today. Instead, the constitutional North Star they gave us for the census is simply that it be accurate. These ongoing efforts to cast doubts about the results of the 2020 census, the census that was conducted, I might add, while Donald Trump was president, are part of a larger scheme. One MAGA extremists have designed to redraw maps mid-decade in a blatant power grab so that Republicans can win more seats in Congress and keep their majority, despite the increasing unpopularity of their Project 2025 agenda. In effect, they're seeking a pre-gerrymander even as they attempt other gerrymanders. The ongoing lawsuit in Florida, which seeks to overturn the 2020 census by challenging some of its counting methodologies, fits right into this scheme. The suit, filed against a Trump administration that's presumably sympathetic to the plaintiffs, may be just the pretext this administration is looking for to push for a census redo. But if their efforts succeed, Americans will suffer. Undercounts and other counting errors particularly hurt vulnerable and hard-to-reach populations, including young children, racial and ethnic minorities, the transient and homeless, those in non-traditional housing arrangements, and those living in very rural or very dense urban communities. In other words, people living in America who patronize its businesses, drive on its roads, attend its schools, and use its essential public services, people who we need to have included in the count. If these lawsuits by plaintiffs get their way and the methods used to account for these populations are prohibited or limited, essentially putting the federal government's head in the sand, we'll only move farther away from, not closer to, an accurate and complete count. Federal funds will be misdirected. States, local governments, businesses, nonprofits, and others will make less informed decisions, inadvertently depriving people of what they need to live and thrive in our communities. And that is devastating for millions. Of course, we all want, as the chair suggests, our census picture to be fuller and more accurate. It's what our democracy demands. And we should all strive to improve our data collection and prevent undercounts as we look forward to the scheduled regular 2030 census. But to make that a reality, we should be talking about reforms that limit the executive branch's ability to interfere in the count for political purposes, or reforms to ensure that the Census Bureau has adequate funding and flexibility to do the job right. We shouldn't try to curtail or ignore scientific methods which are available to complete such a huge undertaking, or consider changes that make people trust this process less and rather than participating in it more. The census and its results are too consequential for that. So I look forward to hearing our discussion today, and I yield back.